I want to introduce one of my best friends. She is a father's rights attorney out of Birmingham, Alabama. You're really going to like her. Melissa Isaak.
It's great to be here today, and you guys, we really have an amazing team. Like Eric said, we're not well-funded. We are not. We are largely, very much so, self-funded. And everyone is here because we've been impacted by the family court system in some way. I was an alienated child, right? And I'm a second wife, right? And us second wives out there, we have so much influence, all right, on keeping families together and being a support system for your husband, because a lot of the times you are the only one, right? But a lot of us are impacted. Again, I was an alienated child. I grew up largely without my father with a very, very abusive mother. So, you know, we'll talk about this later too, but passion comes from anguish. So if the things that we're talking about, if you can relate, if it sparks something with you, grab onto that and see where you fit within this movement that we have for change, because passion comes from anguish. But again, I'm a father's rights attorney. I largely limit my representation to men. And I take a lot of heat for that. But again, there's a reason that I do this, because I've seen the injustice, I've lived the injustice, and I've felt the consequences of the injustice. So, I was a child therapist prior to going to law school because I wanted to work with these kids who came from these broken families. Because I tell you what, I think everyone in this room, whether you were divorced or not, have probably been impacted by family court. Either you are going through it, maybe your children have gone through it, maybe a sibling of yours has gone through it, maybe you're a second wife, but at some point, this hits you and it says, you know, this doesn't make any sense. So I wanted to be part of the solution. So I went from being a child therapist and going into court and seeing like, this doesn't make any sense. So then I went to law school. It makes even less sense now, by the way. I'm going to try to break it down and show you guys exactly how crazy and insane the family courts can be. Oh, wrong way. Okay, so what are parental rights, right? Our parental rights, I believe, are under attack, but what are parental rights? What separates me from you being able to make a decision for my child, right? It's the decision making. That's what gives us the rights. My children go to private school. That's a decision that my husband and I have made. Decided not to put them in private school. I decide. I make medical decisions. I decide what religion they are. I decide what church they go to. That's a decision that the parents make that is fundamental in forming who your children are. We make those rights as parents. Cultural decisions. We're a multicultural society. We make those decisions for our children. That is really the crux of parental rights, right? It's that decision making that we have control over our children. And parental rights are a constitutionally protected liberty interest, okay? Now what does this mean? This means above all, the Constitution says that the right to be a parent, the right for the custody and control of your children is fundamental. It's fundamental. When something is a fundamental constitutional right, that means the state has a really, really high burden that they have to meet before they infringe on those rights, before they infringe on the ability to step in and say, you know what, I'm going to make the decision for your children for you, or we're going to take your children from you. That's something that is constitutionally protected. Again, you guys, the burden is so incredibly high, or it should be. So we kind of went over this. A fundamental right may only be limited in circumstances where the government's interest in a specific matter of public importance outweighs the individual's fundamental right, and where the limitation on the fundamental right is as narrow as possible to achieve the important governmental goal. What governmental interest do the states have in relegating a father to every other weekend? What is the compelling interest in the states? No one can answer that question. No politicians, no judges, but they do this, and it's an infringement upon our constitutional rights. So there's different types of rights, right, you have, that the courts have established. So we look at parental interference. When you're married, there's very little parental interference. I'm married right now. Okay, the state doesn't come knocking on my door and say, you know what, we disagree with your decision on private school. We think you should put your kids in public school. There's minimal interference, right? There's some, but it's minimal. When you're going through a divorce, we'll go through this amorphous thing called the best interest standard, but that's the standard that the government uses to decide what's best for your child. And guess what, folks? Just because your relationship breaks down, just because you're now in a divorce with your spouse, the state has the right, they gave themselves the right to step in and say, okay, because the two of you no longer can be married, we will now decide what's best for your children. The simple filing of divorce opens the door for the state to step in and say, you know what, I don't agree with that. I'm going to appoint somebody else, a guardian ad litem, okay, sometimes they're attorneys, sometimes there's not, but I'm going to appoint somebody else who doesn't know you, doesn't know your family, doesn't know your child, doesn't know anything about the situation, but I'm going to appoint them to decide what's best for your child. The simple filing of the divorce, you guys, a breakdown in your relationship is enough to open the door for the state to step in and make decisions on behalf of your children. And unwed dads, my goodness, they have no rights. The only right an unmarried dad has is what is conferred upon him by the mother or the state, right? And sometimes I'll have clients come in and they're not married and they say, well, you know, I'm not married, but we've been living together for 5 years. I've been making decisions. I'm not on the birth certificate. It's not enough, guys. And I tell them, in the eyes of the law, you're no more this child's father than I am. And that's the sad truth, right? So there's different levels of interference. If you're married, they pretty much stay out of it. But if you're not married, you guys, you have no rights. They can literally take your child and leave. A mother can take your child and leave. A mother can get married to someone else, amend the birth certificate, and do a lot of things, right? So we talk a lot about this best interest standard, okay? So I'm going to show you the uniform best interest standard definition, all right? Because you as parents need to know if the state's going to step in and if they're going to make decisions or take my child away from me, shouldn't you at least know what you're coming up against? Here's the uniform best interest standard definition. It's not a mistake. There isn't one. There isn't a uniform definition. All right? So, and I asked a judge one time, well, judge, what's your definition of the best interest standard? You're making decisions for these parents, for this father, on the level of involvement, the level of decision making. What's your definition of best interest standard? You know what he said? I don't know. I guess you know it when you see it. Right? That's the Supreme Court's definition of pornography. I guess you know it when you see it. Mm-hmm. So, and I live in Alabama, do the bulk of my practice in Alabama. So let's say two parents disagree on football. Okay? Football is huge in the South, right? We live and die by football. So if a mom says, Judge, look, my son he's a little guy, I don't want him playing the sports, I'm afraid he's going to get hurt. And dad's over there saying, I don't know, my son's going to play football. The judge will say, you know what, yeah, I'm going to go with dad over here. My son played football, he never got hurt. So go ahead and play football. Or, you can side with mom against dad's wishes. And what did Aaron just talk about, you guys? Gender transition, this is starting to seep into the courts. And guess what? Guess who makes a decision? Parents can't agree. The doors open up for the state to step in. Just like in the Jeff Younger case out of Texas. I suggest you look this case up. The judge steps in and says, yeah, I mean, a 7-year-old boy, he tells mom, yeah, I want to be a little girl. But he tells dad, no, I don't. Well, you know, since this is subjective, I'm going to go with mom. Let's gender transition this 7-year-old little boy. It's that arbitrary and it's scary. We've been in court and we've tried cases over custody. Mom says, well, he's an unfit dad. Because at 9:30 at night he gives his children ice cream. I'm thinking, I say, well, Judge, I do that. Am I an unfit parent? It's a Saturday night, we're watching movies. Mom says, well, you know, and then Dad says, well, Judge, all she makes me eat is vegetables. She's a vegetarian. I don't think that's healthy. We're not employing science. We're not employing the law. We're employing subjectivity, but it's to parental decision making. You guys, this is scary because it's a slippery slope. So the definition, whatever the judge interprets it to mean. And we're dealing with constitutional, fundamental rights. And there's no uniform definition. It's literally this arbitrary. Let's look at the Alabama definition, right? They look at the age and gender of the child. Guess what, folks? There's been research out there for over a decade said it doesn't matter how old the child is. It doesn't matter what their gender is. Dads are just as capable of taking care of children as moms are.
Yay.
They're just as capable. And we have research, peer-reviewed research that's saying this. Yet, that might be one of the biggest factors that they use in determining custody. You know, the most difficult cases that I have are dealing with babies and toddlers. And the judges will say this, I just don't know if I can give, even 50-50 custody, right? That's what the research says is best for children. I just can't in good conscience just let this baby go home with his dad. Well, why not, Judge? Why not? You just said this on the record. Why not? Well, I just feel like little babies belong with their moms. But the problem is that has been something that we as a society have embraced. We've been okay with the every other dad schedule. We've been okay with that. So here it is. It's codified in the statute. Age and gender. The mental and emotional health of the parents. Well, guys, guess how many cases have experts? Most of them do not. So you have an untrained judge who is saying, well, you know what? You're a vegetarian. I think that's a little bit weird. I'm going to send you for a mental health evaluation. Because it's that arbitrary. Yet, remember, we're dealing with a fundamental constitutional right. Okay? Special needs of the child. How well the parents cooperate with each other. This is a big one. This is a big one. I will say this, 99% of the dads that come through my business, they're very laid back. They say, look, I don't want anything. I don't want the house. I don't care about the lamps. I don't care about anything in the kitchen. I just want to be a dad. I want 50-50 custody. I just want to be a dad. Okay. So he's over there bending over backwards or trying to work with mom. But let's say mom doesn't want to work with dad. Mom is uncooperative. She's rigid. The judge says, you know what? These parents can't work together. One person can destroy that relationship. And so wait a minute, Judge. Why don't we look at who the difficult parent is here? We've got text messages. We've got emails. We've got recordings. We've got everything to show that this dad has bent over backwards to try to cooperate with his mom, and she just won't. Well, you know, the easy thing to do for these judges is to say, you know what, I don't know. Custody to mom, dad, you pay child support, because that's what we do as a society, right? Now that is changing. That is changing. I would say, in my best guesstimate, maybe 10 to 15% of cases are actually tried in court. We try about 70% of our cases. We're not going to give it up. We don't give up. But that's what you have to do. You have to get in there and you have to fight. You have to fight. And not just you dads, because I can tell you something. The problem is one of the problems is you go see an attorney and they say, listen, this judge is older, they don't believe in shared custody, this is the best you're going to get. You need to just sign this, every other weekend, but you get some Wednesdays thrown in there, just pay her child support, just go on with your life. You might get worse if you walk in the courtroom. So there's attorneys who make these big promises, right? Oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then right before court, they scare these dads into signing these agreements. So sometimes they'll bring them in and I'm reading this, I'm like, this is garbage, why did you sign this? My attorneys told me I had to. My attorney said if I go to court, that's how I'm going to get. And in the meantime, we're creating fatherless children. That's what we're doing. Well, let's look at Texas. You can't read that. I'll read it to you. So here's the Texas definition. They admit This is actually on an attorney's website. The modern legal standard of the best interest of the child is subjective and indeterminate. A court's direction is bounded only by two amorphous legal principles. Their decision must be made in the best interest of children and must give effect to the legal rights of non-custodial parents to form or maintain relationships with the children. It's amorphous. It is amorphous. And again, we're dealing with constitutional rights. Now, and it goes down a list of factors, and at the bottom it says, well, this list is not exhaustive. It's not exhaustive. It gives the judges a guideline, gives them some considerations. And it has to be tailored to the needs of the child. So when we fight for legislation. We say, look, when a mom and a dad walk in the courtroom, there's no reason why there can't be a presumption that they're both fit. The Supreme Court already says that, by the way, but the states go, they turn their nose to it. So you walk in there, there's no reason the judges can't say, you know what, I'm going to assume, Dad, that you're fit. I'm going to assume, Mom, you're fit. And let's go from there. Let's tailor something that works for this family. And the judges say, well, we can't do that. It limits our discretion. Because these cases are so individualized that we have to just take everything in consideration and we need to craft something that works for this family. Oh, is that why? The judges either say, okay, custody to mom, custody to dad, or every other weekend. They have a cookie cutter system. They don't use this discretion that they say they need. They don't use it. And the problem is what happens, right? They know if child support is paid, money goes into the pockets of the courts, money goes into the pockets of the states. So much money. And let's talk about the attorneys. Who's contributing to the judges' campaigns? The attorneys do. The attorneys. I know attorneys back in Alabama that have relationships with mortgage companies because if people can't pay them, they say, well, you can go over here and you can take a mortgage on your house and take out the equity. Yeah, so I was talking with an attorney. He said his average custody case is $35,000. How many of you have an extra $35,000 laying around? I know I don't. Right? But they do this because they know that you're going to fight and they know you're going to pay. They know that parents are going to engage the system. And lawyers are making money, psychologists are making money, judges are making money. You look at all of the people nestled up to the family court T, they're all making money. And they're disregarding your constitutional rights as parents. So let's look at the parental rights interference during and after a divorce. So you have this best interest standard, right? The judges have to analyze, they have to scrutinize what's best for this child. But they can grant custody to one parent, and this can often be done by what's called an ex parte order, which means you don't get to say. Somebody might knock on your door and say, oh, here you go, here's an order from the court. You have to leave your home, don't talk to your children, and you got a hearing in 30 days. If you're lucky, especially in the era of COVID. And kick you out of your house, they can say, you have to pay all the bills. And all the dads say, listen, I can't pay all the bills. If I pay all the bills here, I'll be living out of my car. They shrug their shoulders, they'll figure it out. They'll figure it out, right? And they can limit a parent's free speech. Just like they did to Jonathan Vanderhagen. We'll let you out of jail, but you gotta be quiet. You can't talk about it. There's some courts, the juvenile courts, that are sealed. If you talk about it, you go to jail. So people say, I don't understand. I mean, I've never heard of this before, because a lot of this is confidential. They seal you. There's been courts that have said, listen, you can't punish parents for talking on social media. You can't punish parents for criticizing judges, but do it, then walk in their courtroom and see what they do. So I want to show you, this is an actual order from one of my cases. You may not could read it, but I'll read it to you. So in this particular circuit, as soon as a divorce is filed, right, the judges enter what's called a standing pendente lite order. It's a standing temporary order. So remember, a divorce is filed, no one stepped foot in the courtroom yet. No one. On the bottom, number 3. Child custody and support. In the event there are minor children of the parties, The children shall remain in the primary custody of whichever parent they are with at the time this order is entered. The minor children shall not be removed from the jurisdiction of the court. Child support shall be paid in accordance with the child support guidelines. Wait a minute. We're dealing with a fundamental constitutional right, first of all, and the judges say, no, we can't do a 50-50 shared parenting because I need close discretion to decide which parent is best for this child. And we have orders that are being entered simply because a divorce is filed, and here's what it says. Children are to remain in the primary custody of whichever parent has them at the time this order is entered. It's that arbitrary. So let's say mom's an alcoholic, and let's say that she took off with the kids, and dad filed because he's afraid for their safety, and this order is entered. Who has custody? Mom! Wait a minute. What happened to this best interest analysis that was supposed to happen? Gone. And then you have to file to amend this and get a hearing. A lot can happen between the time these orders are entered and there's a hearing. But you guys, it's this arbitrary. And I will say this too, orders like this automatically pit parents against each other. Automatically. Because if dad has custody, mom's at the defensive. And we've seen more of the silver bullet allegations come from orders like this. The silver bullet allegations that Eric was talking about, that Ajit was talking about. Allegations of abuse, allegations of sexual molestation. And I had a conversation once with a military member at one of my training events. And he said, less than 1% of domestic violence accusations are actually false. Less than 1%? Then how is it that my office is able to defeat about 70% of them if it's just less than 1%? So this narrative is being shoved down our throats. This narrative that men are bad, men are abusive. Just like Eric said, just like Ajit said. More children are abused in the care of their mothers than they are with the fathers. More children are abused by boyfriends than they are by their fathers. But you take their fathers out and you relegate them to every other weekend, you're taking away their protector.
Where do you get that statistic?
I'm sorry?
Where do you get the statistic that more kids are abused by their mothers?
Okay, she asked, where do we get the statistic? It's on the CDC website. These are governmental statistics, by the way, that more children are abused in the care of mothers than fathers. Well, I bring up the statistic and the response is, well, of course kids are abused more with their mothers. Mothers have custody more of the time. I'm like, did you hear what you just said? Did you hear what you just said? But if my office, I'm just a solo practitioner, guys. Well, I say that. I'm self-employed. I have probably the biggest law firm in the state of Alabama. We live in a representation of dads. If we can disprove domestic violence 70% of the time based upon passion, imagine if law enforcement would actually, do their job. Or if the court would, do their jobs. Imagine this, because you can make these false allegations. And I've asked the judge, Judge, we have recordings, we have video, we just proved that she lied, what are you going to do? Well, Miss Isaac, I'm not going to make this more contentious than it needs to be, so we'll just go ahead and I'm going to grant you 50-50 custody. Can I get attorney's fees? Perjury is almost encouraged. So, and here's the thing is, when a divorce is filed, again, your relationship with your spouse broke down. You didn't do anything wrong, but just because there's filing, you may need permission to take your child on vacation. You might need to get permission from the court to say, hey, can my dad pick up my kids from school? Can my spouse pick up my kids from school? You might need permission to take your child to a doctor, to take them to church, to pay extracurricular activities, all because your relationship broke down. This is the hardest one, is unwed parents. Now, just like Eric was saying, people aren't getting married like they were anymore. Marriage is something that is just fallen by the wayside. People say, I don't need to get married to have a baby. And men don't trust getting married. There's a lot of men saying, look, I'm not getting married, you guys, because it's too unfair. But let's look at these unwed dads. So I don't have a slide for it. There's something called the Putative Father Registry or the Responsible Father Registry. Anybody in here heard of that besides my team over here? So here's the thing, guys, get this. If you're an unmarried dad, when you have sex with someone, you have anywhere from 20 to 30 days to sign your name to what's called the Responsible Father Registry or the Putative Father Registry. If you don't do it when the child's born and your name is not on this registry, guess what? You lose your right to contest an adoption. That means your child can be adopted out from underneath you. You have no right to contest it. You have no right to contest it. But here's the thing, I mean, that's a pretty significant law, isn't it? Because if you're an unwed dad, you could lose rights to your child. I had a guy come in, his baby was 3 months old, there was an adoption. You see, they were living together. They lived together the entire time. She went behind his back, did all of this, right? He got word the adoption was going through. We quick filed something in the courts. We got it stopped, right? But nobody knows this. So I was on the telephone with a guy who wrote, an attorney in Alabama, who actually wrote this statute in Alabama. I didn't know he wrote the statute at the time. And I said, what fool came up with this? Like this guy must be an idiot who wrote the statute, right? And he was like, actually, it was me. And I thought, I said, well, then you are an idiot because this is irresponsible. Lawyers are responsible, especially family attorneys are responsible for more social malpractice than anything else. Because why would you do that? And he said to me, you know, but the thing is as soon as, it's called the Pants Up Doctrine. As soon as a man pulls his pants up, he's on notice that he may have impregnated this mother. Well, shouldn't the mother be on notice as to how many men she slept with? Shouldn't there be a registry out there for her? We're not going to shame women. He said it's women shaming, but we're okay with shaming men. Wow. We're not going to women shame. That's what he said. So we're setting these kids up to be without fathers, possibly without mothers. So a father then has to file a petition with the court and say, look, Judge, I'm this child's father. There was a sexual relationship, but the 7 to 9 months before the child was born, they won't let me in the hospital. More dads find out on social media that they're dads. These unwed dads, and it's sad. They're not allowed in the hospital. So they have to file. And once paternity established, what's the first thing the states want to do as soon as they say, okay, DNA test came back, you're dad, what's the first thing the states want to do? Put them on child support. Now, this isn't in the statute anywhere, but most states also have a judicially created law, which is illegal, by the way, that an order of child support is also an award of custody. So there's guys that come in and they say, well, I went to child support court and I told them I wanted to have custody, but they told me that's a different court, so I'm here for that. I'm like, she already got custody. We're challenging that. But the judges the judiciary tends to protect itself. And they don't like necessarily outsiders like myself who come in and criticize them. But you guys don't know that. That's the thing, is you have to know. So a father, especially if there's resistance from the mother, if he's unwed, he's got a long road ahead of him. So let me ask you, who do you think said this? The state needs to be the ultimate guarantor of a child's well-being. There is no alternative to that. The reason that parent-child relationships exist is because the state confers legal parenthood on people through its paternity and maternity laws. It's the state that is empowering parents to do anything with children, to take them home, to have custody, to make any kind of decisions about that. You think maybe Nazi Germany? Where'd this come from? Can we play the video on the next slide? I don't know how to do it here.
Takes a village.
The ultimate guarantor of a child's well-being. There's just no alternative to that. The reason parent-child relationships exist is because the state confers legal parenthood. on people through its paternity and maternity laws. It's the state that is empowering parents to do anything with children, to take them home, to have custody, and to make any kind of decisions about that.
Thanks to Michelle Malkin for this video. This is a professor, you guys, at William & Mary Law School, very prestigious law school. I think it's the second oldest college in the United States. And this professor, James Dyer, also teaches at Harvard. Here's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with professors, renowned professors, teaching students. No. Parents don't have rights. The only rights parents have is what the states allow them to have. This is permeating the legal profession. It's permeating. Never mind that the United States Supreme Court says the right to have the custody and control of your children, to make decisions, is a fundamental liberty interest. This is what we're seeing from a renowned professor. You guys, this should scare all of us. Because when we look at what happened in other countries, when they chip away, and they chip away, and they chip away, and then all of a sudden, you have no say over your children. This has happened before, and it's infiltrating our country. It's infiltrating, not infiltrating, it has infiltrated. Look at the James Younger case. Who would have ever thought we'd be arguing in court about gender transitioning a 7-year-old, castrating a 7-year-old? Yet we're having these discussions. And guess what? In Texas, with this particular judge, he's relegated now to just a few hours a month with his children. And why? Because dare he defy the court by saying, you don't talk about this? How dare he defy the court? There was no unfitness finding in that case, but the problem is we have, I'm going to call him a Nazi professor, who's out there teaching students to go in the courtroom and say, you know what? No, parents, I don't care what you want. This judge wants something different. I don't care what you think is best. This person who's never met your child is going to make this decision. And let me ask you, where are the lawyers? Where are the lawyers? Oh, I'm sorry, they're too busy making money off the destruction of families and children to care. Right? It's not happening to them, is it? We've given control to the state. We have. I'm going to talk about the feminist movement, guys. Look at the feminist movement. What did it do? Custody kind of went to mothers. I was raised by a single mother, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that she did a good job. She did a horrible job. She did a horrible job. And one reason I didn't see my father for like a 2-year span is because how dare he move on and get a girlfriend? How dare he move on and get married to someone else? That happens. But instead of standing in, what have dads done? And I'm not blaming my father, okay? This is 70s and 80s, this was not a friendly time for fathers. Not that it's much better now. But fathers were told, pay your child support. You want to be a good dad, you pay your child support. Well, I want to see my child. You can see him 4 days a month, if she lets you. But what do we do in the meantime? What do we do as a society? We sat back and watched. We sat back and watched it happen. In 2014, 111 social scientists from around the world came to a consensus that shared parenting was in the best interest of children. So children who were in the care of mom and dad as equal as possible after divorce or separation did just as well as parents of an intact family. This was in 2014. I've been ramming this research down the throats of these judges. And are we getting 50-50? We are. But why is it such a fight? Why is it such a fight? And that's when false allegations aren't made. You throw false allegations in the mix, which there are a lot of them. You guys, once this ball starts rolling, it's so hard to stop. But where's society? Where's the parents? I'm not seeing them. Child welfare of children in shared custody situations after divorce mirror those of children of intact families. This is peer-reviewed research. And look, guys, I'm not talking about 111 social scientists who went to junior college. I went to junior college, I'm not knocking it. But we're talking about world-renowned social scientists. And for social sciences to reach a consensus on anything is a notable feat in itself. I think we all know that. But the courts and the legislators have turned a blind eye to this research that we have, that we know is out there. You know, one thing I really like to do is I like to talk to, like I started out with, I like to talk to the women out there. Because there are some amazing advocates out there who are men. And then we have a lot of the feminist groups who will come forward and say, you just don't want to pay child support. You're just trying to control her through your children. And they're saying, I want to be a dad. Like Eric brought up, $60 billion, a lot of that is men pumping their money in the system. They're not trying to get on child support, they're trying to be dads. We see the statistics of these children who grow up without dads, and yet we sit back and we do nothing, right? I'm a second wife. I do everything I can do to make sure that his relationship with his children is on the forefront. When his children were in high school, he had 2 teenagers with his first wife. I said, listen, maybe just the 2 of you need to go have dinner. Just the 2 of you, hash it out. And some of my friends were like, you want your husband to go have dinner with his ex-wife? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Because I understand that these kids need him just as much as they would if they were still married. Women, watch your circle too. I can't tell you how many times we'll call in witnesses and there's women standing around saying, girl, get what you can. Or this one, what do you need me to say? Really? I'm gonna tell the judge you just said that. I'm going back to 3rd grade right now. I'm gonna tell on you. What did you just say? We need to do the best that we can. We need to become the best versions of ourselves that we can. How did my situation, right? But not to go into depth, in my situation, okay? Grew up impoverished, right? Went to trailer park, public housing, ended up in foster care for a while. All because of poor decisions of her. But I became a problem for my school. I became a problem for the neighborhood. It wasn't just a problem within my family. I was on welfare the whole time growing up. It's a financial burden on society. So this ignited, and various things happened, but this ignited a passion in me. I'm one person. I'm one person. These guys would come in, they were getting kicked out of their houses. They were living in their vehicles. I go, well, what can I do? So my firm has a house, fully furnished house, where dads can stay with their children for free if they have nowhere else to go, because that preservation of relationship is so important. And we hear about the suicide rate, right? We also offer a life coach for free to these guys, because I want them to leave at least with a better understanding than when they came in. And I don't say this for accolades, I don't, but I want to impress upon you. I'm one person that grew up in poverty, okay? That should have been a statistic, and I'm not. I'm one person doing my part. Imagine if everybody in this room stood up and stood in for what's right. Guys, we can change the world. If 10% of us stood up and really held the line and did what's right, we could change the world. And I'm blessed to be in the company of my colleagues today. And I can tell you that the amount of passion that radiates from over there, I hope you feel it too. Because we definitely are the minority, and we need all of you to stand up and stand with us.